I've got my dancing shoes. Yep, right on time.
Oh wow.
That's the way I should do it.
Good morning, Timothy,
Morning,
and
Maya.
everybody who just joined us at this point of time and who is going to join us later today and maybe during the week. It's a pleasure to have you all with us. And once again, Timothy is reporting from Katsuyama. We are going to talk about the Japanese politics or political events that happened during the past 1 week and put them in context, of course. So thank you very much for joining us. And Timothy, it was nice to see your dance, but I'm glad that it wasn't on screen.
Well, I think one of these days you're just going to trick me and you're going to turn the camera on prematurely just to teach me a lesson.
A lesson, yes. Right.
So I do that. I do that before every broadcast, Maya, so that when we go live, your teeth kind of recess back into your gums and you look a little bit more like a pleasant personality.
Indeed, yes.
Than before the program starts. Damn.
Yeah, because otherwise I chew people all around. I know that.
Oh, gosh.
Yes. Poor everybody who is in any proximity, you know.
Speaking of proximity, Maya, last night at 2 o'clock in the morning, Tokyo got hit by a 5.8, 5.9, maybe, I'm not quite sure the exact magnitude, but an earthquake that was centered in the Tokyo Chiba region.
Yes, I think that last night when I checked, because I was woken up by the shaking, so it was...
Is that why your hair looks like that?
Yes, yeah, I didn't have time. But no, last time I checked, they said that it was Gojaku, which is a little bit under 5,
okay.
But that is the Japanese scale, okay? And so the magnitude is different, and I haven't checked the magnitude, so it's probably close to 6. Oh, 5.9. Yes, thank you, Patricia. 5.9, yes.
And 5.9 is pretty big.
It is. It was really scary here.
Yeah. So I'm sitting on the water. I did get the alert at 2 o'clock in the morning, almost exactly at 2. And when you're on the water, you don't feel it. Maybe the sea change, maybe there's something like that, but you don't feel it, and you don't feel it immediately. So I woke up, I saw that it was rather large and it was in the vicinity. So I just stayed on the deck to see if there was any cause for alarm, or should I begin to untie my lines and get out of port or something like that? Because that's a possibility too, right?
It is a possibility, yes. Thankfully, this time there wasn't such an alert and such a possibility, so... Oh, we lost Timothy again. Yes, so to everybody who is not in Japan, last night around 2 o'clock there was a strong earthquake in Ibaragi, I think it was the epicenter, and it was felt really strong here in Tokyo as well. Thankfully, there were no tsunamis because of the earthquake, and well, things seem to be back to normal today. I guess there's very little destruction or damage, if any, because we know that in case of such earthquakes, usually it's not the buildings that are damaged badly. The danger comes from, well, the sea, from tsunamis. Okay, Timothy is back. Good morning once again, Timothy. Oh,
every once in a while, something happens with this program that we're broadcasting on, and I have to restart it, so I apologize.
That's fine. But now, today we're going to talk about Japanese politics, right? And it's no, it's not winter, it's summer. It's summertime, it's summer holidays, and still, well, political events continue coming. And we've got quite a few of them to talk about. So, Timothy, what are we going to hear about from you
Maya.
today?
Great. Today is 289, the 289th episode of talking about Japanese politics, geopolitics, what's going on here and around Japan that influences the economy, trade, different embassies, movements, and things like that. We're in the dog days of summer. So next week is the final day of August, and things will start to pick up then. But this last week was eerily quiet. Even the yen, if you watch the yen, it was very quiet. The prime minister was quiet. There were a couple of things that were going on. There's a realignment now being locked in for a cabinet reshuffle, but they've pushed the date back. I think the prime minister is trying to align her forces, and there's this tension between Aso and Takaichi. You don't want to put too much emphasis on it. She's prime minister because of him. He has the only faction in Japanese politics these days. But there is a little bit of alignment or realignment that he wants, and there's certainly a little bit of realignment that she wants. The yen closed down at 158.96, almost 157. And when it gets to 160, you know, everybody starts having a conniption fit and getting worried about that. But it's in a very narrow band. We don't expect much movement there, but I'd like to talk about that a little bit as we get along into this briefing. The July exports recorded their strongest growth since 2022, and the government continues to manage this friction between Washington and Moscow, while opponents within the Diet try and reshape the issue. What I'm talking about is, the Russian premier visiting the Northern Territories, and Ms. Takaichi's reaction to that, and then the ICC reaction to the Japanese judge and the United States censure of her, and Japan's kind of soft reaction to that too. So she is opened up for a target, but that's always the case. And that was what happened this last week. I'll get into more of the details and some of the more really interesting thing that's going on geopolitically and economically here in Japan to keep you up to speed. I'll turn it back over to you, Maya. I'll talk for about 30 minutes. If you can give me 30 minutes, ladies and gentlemen, and then we'll get into the Q&A. Maya?
Thank you for that. And yes, once again to everybody watching, thank you for joining us. Patricia, I'm sorry that your gas is not and the elevator is not working. I guess that the fastest way is to talk to neighbors and somebody, who has been there for a longer time so that they can help you. At least that's what I did the last time there was a strong earthquake here. And it was the neighbors who helped me understand how to turn the gas on back. And yes, so obviously...
My gas seems to be fine.
Your gas, yes. That's good. All right. And to everybody who was in the area, I hope that you're all safe too. Yeah, it was a strong shake, and yeah, it was really scary, but it's over now. Hopefully, we're not going to see another strong one anytime soon. And to everybody watching us, thank you very much for spreading the word, helping us do that. So these briefings are voluntary, and we thank you very much and are grateful for your help in this regard. So share them with friends and colleagues who might benefit from them, who are working with Japan or in Japan, living here and doing business here. Again, there is a synopsis going out every week, a couple of days after the briefing is over. You can find it on Substack, also on the website of Langley Esquire, and also on LinkedIn. So, Timothy, let's move on to the body of the briefing, and then from there, we'll go to the Q&A session.
Thank you very much, Maya. So as I said, it was a bit of a quiet week. We are in the dog days of summer. Obon is somewhat past us. It was maybe 6 days ago. This last week was the tail end of that. But if you're in town, you notice that the traffic is down, the flow of people are down. Tourism is also kind of holding steady. I'm going to get to the figures later in the briefing, but you would have thought that more and more people were visiting Japan, but it might be just because of the summer and the heat. More people are finding other places more pleasantly temperature-wise to visit. But the prime minister has basically stayed put inside the Kantei. She's received a little bit of criticism. During the Obon vacation, she kind of waxed eloquently on X about her life and her lifestyle and how much time she works. And then there was a report that came out comparing her work schedule, her Monday through Friday or Sunday through Saturday work schedule compared to Ishiba and Kishida, and kind of making a comparative analysis and pointing out that she's received fewer visitors, as we all know, and she seems to have worked less time-wise in meeting with constituents and groups and committee chairs, mostly just surrounding herself with her inner circle. And this we also know about this prime minister, that she is rather insular. She stays inside the Kante. She's not out carousing. She's not, backslapping with other people, because it's just not her style. But she is, coming off a very successful diet session in the spring, not very long ago, and now it's in a realignment time for her to prepare for an extraordinary diet session. That session was predicted to be maybe late September. It looks like it's going to be pushed off to October. The cabinet reshuffle looked like it was going to be end of August. That looks like now late September. And there are a couple of interesting people that you need to keep an eye on. But at least diplomatically, it has been quiet, but not silent. Mr. Motegi visited Saudi Arabia. It's his first visit since the Iran conflict began. He's been there for almost 4 days. And the prime minister received her first phone call from the new British prime minister, Anand Burham, and they affirmed, of course, their alignment, their co-work with Italy on the advanced fighters and the Euro-Atlantic and Indo-Pacific security, and cooperation on how they're going to be dealing collaboratively on North Korea and on Ukraine. And Defense Minister Koizumi was in India all this last week, and also not accompanied by, but he was also bringing, as a component of his visit, two F-2s that belong to the Air Self-Defense Forces of Japan. This is the first time for physically these airplanes to go on maneuvers in India. There was a lot of fanfare built about that. The foreign minister of both countries meeting and having a press release. But I've got to tell you from experience, it's hard to envision two countries so different, but so much in need of each other, being so far apart, and so difficult to kind of mend those business practices and get business together. The Indians want the Japanese investment, and they want manufacturing and resources there. That satisfies Japan too, but Japan would like to have purchases of Japanese materials and that sort of thing, and that is kind of out of balance. The Indians would prefer to keep their capital at home and generate more revenue at home, and also have opportunities to employ their tremendous population. The relationship between India and Japan needs to get better. It needs to be much more robust. It's just a very difficult. The two cultures are very different. There is a big span of space between the two of them, but they are members of the Quad. And much more needs to be done in that regard. And I think that was the mission of the defense minister. He's back in town now, and we will follow what he's doing. But he's also an interesting person to watch. This realignment that we're talking about with the prime minister, she's got the cabinet, 22 formal cabinet ministers. Some ministers have 2 or 3 portfolios. Some of them, like defense minister or finance minister, they have one single portfolio and a lot of people reporting to them. But of these 22, and plus, I don't want to say minor ones, but they still hold a cabinet rank. The prime minister, when she becomes prime minister, after she's elected prime minister, she might promote or say who will be on her team. But then after she becomes prime minister, then she issues her appointments. And in the last iteration, of course, Taro Aso had a say in that, and had his people in place. But given that he's the largest faction, he didn't take a lot of seats. He only took 1 cabinet seat. And then for himself, he took the vice president of the LDP, which is not a cabinet position. And then his brother-in-law, Mr. Suzuki, took the secretary general, which is the next highest position beyond those two. So he took the top choices and kind of let the chips fall elsewhere. We don't know what's going to happen in the next reshuffle, but the Prime Minister has expressed her desire to have someone of her own choosing to be the Secretary General. I mean, if she's got Mr. Aso as the Vice President and as his brother-in-law as the Secretary General, she really can't, well, it's not nefarious, but, she can't do anything without their go-ahead, even before the discussions start. And I think she'd like a little bit more freedom there. And the Secretary General's position is a key one, so we're going to be watching that closely in the reshuffle. I don't know if she'll be able to slot in her favorite, because if she does, the dynamics change. And Mr. Aso might rightly say, okay, you're taking the Secretary General, I'll give that to you, but I would sure like defense. I would like, I'd like Konotaro, my protege, to be Secretary of Defense again. And I'd like these other choice seats too. So be on the watch for that. But certainly, it's going to have a little bit more of the flavor of the Takaichi administration. And there will be a realignment. How much political capital she spends on that and how much she suffers from the choices that she makes will all be revealed later, like in November or December. But it's going to be really active in October. So stand by for that. September will be very, very busy too. Like I said, next week is the last week of this month. So it's really coming up. Koizumi's position is really curious. It's important. He doesn't have a he's the defense minister. He beat Takaichi in the first round to become president of the LDP. She beat him in the second round, and then she became prime minister, or she became president of the LDP, and as a consequence of that became a prime minister. So she gave him a choice seat. In this reshuffle, what does she do with him? Does she keep him as defense minister? If I was Koizumi, I'd like to have that rebound. He seems to be doing well enough there. But maybe she wants to put somebody else in that position. It's a choice position, and not give him as much leverage to challenge her in the next election. And that next election could happen before Christmas, actually, given different circumstances. But it's not unlikely that there could be a snap election if the consumption tax issue and other issues come up and the opposition really starts getting a foothold. So what's going on with Koizumi is going to be interesting. Also with Mr. Hagiura, who is the vice secretary of the LDP, if he moves up. And also Mr. Hayashi, who has already kind of voiced his intention to step down from a choice cabinet position. And that's a signal that he wants to be on the outside so that he can throw stones at the LDP president, his LDP president, and kind of put himself in a position. He was also a candidate for prime minister, you'll probably remember. So the jockeying is already starting. Mr. Konotaro said, this consumption tax issue, Miss Prime Minister, he doesn't have a cabinet seat, remember, is a little bit irresponsible, don't you think? He is, like I said, a protege of Konotaro. So, of course, those words were being relayed through him. But she does have a rear guard action, even with their own party. And how she moves with the cabinet reshuffle and then the timing of the extraordinary diet session and how those forces are aligned and what comes out as a consequence of that is it's critically important. We'll be watching that. The other thing is with the opposition parties. So Mr. Tamaki of the DPFP, the Democratic Party of the People, has said this consumption tax, it stinks. I don't want to have anything to do with it. And we're not going to join in any coalition with an administration that promotes that. So he's out of the picture, but he's starting to build steam. He has an election coming up for party president. It's in it's in process now. You might have seen some news, a debate with one of the younger members of his party. It's really no contest. He is the top dog, and he will be elected as their continuing party chief. But they're a little bit worried that it's more a personality cult of Tamaki rather than this Democratic Party for the people and the aspirations that the party has set out. But you know, he's doing a pretty good job, and he has a strong opposition force. On the contrary, we have Ishin. Ishin is kind of a partner with the LDP, not formally aligned, but they now want to be aligned, and they want a cabinet position to certify that. And so the debate that's going on now in this quiet period that we're at is the cabinet position that they will receive and the other ancillary posts that they insist upon. They'll get something because the LDP and Ms. Takaichi needs their support. Even with 100% LDP voting behind the prime minister, and that's a big question, and even with Ishin voting for them, they'll take over the votes in the House, but not in the Senate. They're still lacking those 4 critical votes. So how she overcomes that is an unsolved problem. So if she wants full Ishin support, then she needs to perform on the commitment that she's going to reduce by 10% the number of members in the lower house. That's a promise that she made without a date specific. Now they want to have that date specific. The other thing that's going on, there are 2 other things that are going on. The combination of the Constitutional Democratic Party, Komeito, and the Central Alliance Reform Group, they're okay in the lower house, but in the upper house, they're fractured. They're 3 different parties. And they're trying to realign the upper house together with the lower house so that they have a strong, unified voice. They would eclipse Mr. Tamaki's group. But since they're fractured, Mr. Tamaki's group is the #1 opposition force. And it looks like they're having real trouble achieving that. Even in the districts, some of the people who are saying, I don't want to be in bed with Komeito, or Komeito saying, yeah, I don't like to be aligned with that group because they believe something that is contrary to our fundamental beliefs. That sort of thing is a real stumbling block. We'll probably know at the beginning of September how that shakes out. It doesn't look so positive at this point. At the same time, the people who have kind of left the Constitutional Democratic Party because of the brouhaha and the change and stuff like that, they've set up their own group called Guerrilla, a guerrilla group, guerrilla warfare. It's not very large at this point, but they aim to defend Article 9 and attract those people who are unhappy with the Central Reform Alliance and the Constitutional Democratic Party and Komeito. And it's just a start now, maybe 3 or 4 Diet members, but they expect maybe 16 to join them. And that would be the emergence of a brand new political entity, possibly even a party. Probably most likely they'll provide the requirements for establishing a party. And that complicates this 3-party integration that's supposed to happen this month, next month, within those 3 opposition parties. It's going to be very active. But the legislation for the consumption tax, it's for 2 years. It's supposed to start in April of next year. 2 years, the consumption tax for foodstuffs, grocery produce, will go from 8% to 1%. And then there's also an additional kicker that after that is finished, there will be a refundable credit from 2029 added to win the support of the opposition party. So she said, look, we're going to soften the blow when the tax kicks back in, we'll have this refundable credit for people in the lower economic regions so that they can take advantage of that, so that the hit of having to pay 8% again on foodstuffs is softened somewhat. So that's the plan right now. It's just in policy negotiations. The bureaucrats have to chew on that and see how it's going to be handled, what's the distribution and what the stores are supposed to do, that sort of thing. That does take quite a bit of bureaucratic time to make those rules and regulations and to pass them through the machinery here. But that battle is the first battle that the Prime Minister will face when the extraordinary diet session begins, which would most likely be in October, November, December. That's not a long period of time. In the meantime, they also have to pass the provisional budget, which they pass at the end of the year. And when the diet opens in January, the provisional budget becomes the blueprint for what the fights are from January until April. And then on April, they must pass the budget. They missed it by a couple of days this year, but that is the deadline for them. And what's happened now is all of the ministries are supposed to submit their budgets for consideration, chewing, and negotiation, stuff like that, so that in December, the administration can pull it all together and form a proposed budget. There's a lot going on there. In addition to the reduction of revenue that the government is going to be getting because of the consumption tax, they're also bolstering the spending too. So the budget requests are rising sharply because the government lifted the ceiling for those items that are termed for a strong and prosperous Japan, which is the keystone of the defense articles that the government passed maybe 4 weeks ago. And the total budget is expected, oh my God, to exceed 130 trillion yen for the first time. Defense is looking at an 8.9 trillion budget. That could pass 10 trillion, in fact, after the security documents are considered. MOFA, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, wants 1.2 trillion. METI is preparing for a 7.7 trillion budget. And the debt servicing costs alone are already projected to be a record 36.6 trillion yen. So as they're spending more and they're receiving less, the debt ceiling, just the accumulated debt just continues to go. That explains Mr. Tamaki's irritation with the Prime Minister, and also why Konotaro stepped out of the background and made a pointed comment to the Prime Minister. So he's angling for a position based on, I am fiscally responsible. She said she's fiscally responsible. We now have a snap election, and don't you want to vote for me? And Mr. Hayashi are going to be saying the same thing, and Mr. Tamaki wants to be Prime Minister as well. So it's going to be rock and roll for the rest of this year. So we're going to keep our eye on it and keep you informed. The other thing that's going on very slowly, it's a slow burn at this point in time, but it was a bonfire 2 weeks ago, is the yen. The yen closed on Friday at 158.94. That's pretty significant. It was at 164. They intervened, the Japanese government, the US government intervened. It went down to 156. It stayed there momentarily, and then it crept up, and now it is still scratching 160. So they got a little bit of a breather, but I think people are realizing that this yen intervention, it's a lot of effort for a little bit of a return. So at least in this point of time, the movement on the yen has been listless. It's been very, very weak. There's no Bank of Japan meeting this month. They meet in September. They pass August. And the next one will be on the 17th and 18th of September, right in the middle of the month. We expect Washington and Tokyo to be working more collaboratively on the yen, on the exchange rate, and on the trade flows. But the range of the bond market between the United States and and Japan is one of the critical features that pushes investments towards the U.S. dollar or coming back into the yen. So it's things all being static, we can anticipate that this is going to continue, but you never know. There could be another cause for an intervention by the United States. And the foreign minister the finance minister has already said, we're ready to act at moment's notice should there be any kind of volatility that's expressed. But in the meantime, the economy is actually looking pretty good. Exports surged for a monthly record 23.2% in July. So we have July numbers. We don't have August yet, but that's the strongest growth since October of 2022. So as you're reading the press and you're hearing about Japan and the doldrums and people are eating cat food and that sort of thing, it doesn't seem to be the reality of the situation. It seems like the economy is picking up, and semiconductors and cars once again led. And Japan's market share of semiconductors, it doesn't produce the semiconductors. It's not renowned for that. Although there is Rapidus up in Hokkaido and in Kumamoto, there's the Taiwanese TSMC. So they are producing that, but that's not where all the action is. The Japanese action is actually in making the machines that make the chips. That's Japan's forte, and it's selling a lot of that. The machine tools, the processes, and that sort of thing. And then once again, in automobiles, Japan does very well. It was at one point, contributing almost 50% of the GDP for the country in a kind of a loose interpretation. But imports at the same time rose faster than exports. So the importing produced a deficit of 364 billion yen. That single month deficit roughly equals about 7% of Japan's entire annual defense budget. So this gap between imports and exports, it's still unaddressed. It's been unaddressed for years and years. They try and keep it as small as possible. But this last month in July was pretty robust. The other thing that happened, of course, is the oil imports, and they jumped 88% as Japan continued to shift away from the Gulf. And the U.S. share of oil volume has risen 7% in February to 36%. So 36% of Japan's importation of oil comes from the United States, and it rose last month by 7% as a consequence of what's going on in Iran. Tourism actually finally turned positive in July, although you would have thought it's been strong ever since. You just walk around and you just notice the foreign tourists everywhere. You can't go anywhere in Japan and not find people who are traveling. They've rented a K-van and they're with their family. It's just really incredible. But it's up only 0.1% for a monthly record, but that's only because of strong gains from Korea and Taiwan. And they offset the 8th consecutive monthly drop of more than 50% of Chinese visitors. So Chinese visitors, they ebb and flow basically in a direct correspondence with the Japan-China relations. And the Chinese-Japan relations have not been altogether very good. There's been a couple of barbs thrown back and forth. There's been some action in the South Pacific Seas. And the tourists follow what the central government says, or maybe the flights are just not available. And I think that happens quite a bit. But year on year, the total of tourism is down by 1.7%. Not a big amount, but enough to get noticed. And the core inflation still remains around the 2% target. That's by the Bank of Japan. But previously, decades of zero inflation meant that wages were frozen and the real burden of debt was somewhat stabilized. But 2% gives the companies a room to raise salaries and to slowly reduce the real weight of public debt. And the current readings are still being held down by energy subsidies for gasoline and that sort of thing that happened throughout this last year. But those are going to be timed out very, very shortly. And so the underlying pressure is expected to rise in September and October. So if you're the prime minister, it's like, don't I get a break? Just when I thought I could have a breather, now the subsidies are coming off of oil and energy costs, and people are clamoring for more relief. You can't win and you can't lose. But With regard to the military, the coming defense request is going to be the largest ever, and it's tied directly to review of the 3 national security documents. And that means long-range drones and missiles are the priority. If you're following this at any distance, you know that that's the kind of the direction of the Japanese self-defense forces. It is moving very briskly there. Also with certain armament being shared or sold to the Philippines and to Australia. So there's a lot going on there. And also the advanced fighter program that Japan is one of the founding members of. And so that costs an awful lot of money too. The other thing that happened this last week was Putin's visit to Etorufu, one of the Northern Territories islands. And he visited a canning factory. It was not meant to be a strategic visit, but I think the signaling was very important. And it was picked up by the prime minister, who complained about it. The Russian ambassador was called to the foreign ministry to receive a complaint, which he carried back to Moscow. And then days later, Moscow did the same thing to the Japanese ambassador. Although when he left the ministry there, he looked to be not a very happy person. And the crowd there was somewhat, I don't know, maybe in Moscow they just appeared to be a little bit more hostile, but it was a little bit of an aggressive crowd there. So the tensions are very high. The fact that the Northern Territories belong to Japan or belong to Russia is a critical issue between these two countries. The prime minister has been advised, why don't you try and make a deal so that we can solve that problem? And I think for those of us who have been following this for decades, you know how difficult that is, maybe even an impossible task. The Russians would probably never give that up, because they know that if Japan received those Northern Territories islands, once again, the United States would swoop in and claim rights for military bases there, which Japan would be honor bound to give them. Interestingly enough, thereafter, just over the last week, the Russian military forces had live fire drills and exercises. They fired several missiles and guided missiles from submarines, from destroyers, and from land-based facilities into the sea facing Japan, not encroaching on Japan's exclusive economic zone. But it is interesting, you know, just in case you forgot that we're here, to have that kind of provocative action. You can tell that things are changing here. At the edges, things are changing, but they tell you that something's going on. You probably caught that Kim Jong-il, the leader of North Korea, and his sister also wagged their finger at Japan and Japan's military expansion, and they are evil, and if they don't start towing the line and being a little bit more docile, you know, we're going to take action as this. They threaten us. So there's, you know, that came out kind of out of the blue, just following when President Trump said, you know, these exercises between South Korea and United States, this very big exercise, we do it annually. On the day that, or the night before they were to start, he announced we should scale that back. You know, it does seem to be a little bit provocative, and my good friend Kim Jong-il, I think he would appreciate the gesture, and so I'm calling for a reduction there. I think it was too late to actually do anything. Maybe it was just a gesture of good faith without actually performing on it. But the statements that came out of North Korea were contrary to that kind of expression of, you know, can we be friends here? Can we open a dialogue? So North Korea is in a very particular situation. It does have nuclear weapons. It has huge animosity towards Japan, and it is threatened to use them on Japan and on South Korea. Kind of similar to what the whole complaint was of the United States with Iran. You know, if they have a nuclear weapon, they'll use it. And now if you look at the pronouncements of North Korea, that sounds like the same thing. They are more prone to use it than anybody else. But who's to say? North Korea could say the same thing about the United States, and the United States and the nuclear powers have a hegemony, and they're not letting anybody else join the club. So who do you think you are? That sort of thing. So it's very much in play here, and it's something we should keep our eye on. You know, in 1858, around this time, actually in July, Townsend Harris signed commercial treaty that opened up 5 points and stripped Japan of tariff autonomy. Before that time, the Bakufu had complete lock on Japan. There was nothing going in, nothing going out. They had a trading port in Nagasaki. There were some trade and goods coming in. Townsend Harris came in, and he was the first to succeed in opening Japan's doors, because 2 years earlier, Commodore Perry showed up in Shimoda with the black ships and said, if you don't open your trade, we're going to blow them open. And then Townsend Harris came through once again. He signed a treaty with the Ryukyu Kingdom, which Japan and the Satsuma clan pretty much considered to be part of their territory. And the United States said, well, forget that. We're going to have a deal with them, and created a treaty with the Ryukyu Kingdom, and then came to Tokyo and signed this agreement with the Bakufu. And 2.5 centuries earlier, we have to keep all of this in context because it has a meaning today. But in April of 1600, an English pilot by the name of William Adams, Anjin Miura, he arrived on a Dutch ship. It was crashed in a small port in southern Japan, and he eventually became an advisor to Tokugawa Ieyasu because he knew something about naval warfare. He knew how to build ships. He knew gunpowder, that sort of thing. So he was one of the first people that actually washed up on shore that they didn't immediately kill, which was the policy back then. But he helped build Japan's first Western-style ships and helped Japan helped the English open a trading port in Hirado. And he is the real-life action figure for Blackthorn, who was in the movie Shogun, or the series Shogun. And 220 years later, I mean, throughout this period of time, even with somebody like Anjin Miura carrying a sword and trying to facilitate trade with the outside world on a very limited basis, any Japanese who built a ship or a boat that was capable of crossing into Korea or something else, they were killed without any questions asked. If anybody washed up on the shores of Japan, they were killed immediately. There was one person, a Japanese kid, a fisherman, who was washed out to sea, and he and 3 or 4 friends crashed on Torishima, which is not very far. It's not very far. I've sailed past it several times before. And they were there for almost a year and were finally rescued by an American whaling ship. And he was kind of adopted by the captain of the ship. He was brought to Massachusetts for a decade, and he was the first Japanese to do so. He returned to Japan in 1852. So that's kind of around the time of the Civil War. It's a little bit after that. But when Perry arrived that next year, this young fellow, his name is Manjiro, John Manjiro. He was one of the first Japanese who could actually explain America from direct experience, and he served as a translator during the opening, and in 1860 sailed on the first ship to go to the United States to embark on an embassy. He returned, but he was on that first mission. And while Adams helped the early Bakufu understand the West from the outside, Manjiro brought the knowledge of the inside just as the system faced its final test. And Harris finally delivered the treaty that ended it all. And Japan opened its doors, and Bakufu collapsed less than a decade later as a consequence of that. The reason why I have this focus on these 3 individuals is because no matter what happens, there is an ebb and a flow of history. And we are in that ebb and flow right now. The Japan that we knew and grew up with and learned the language and came here and tried to figure things out is different from the Japan that we have today. And whether it's Ms. Takaichi or Mr. Ishiba or Mr. Koizumi, whoever it is, that ebb and flow, we're still living in the ebb and flow. And I get upset at people who are so critical of the prime minister. She's doing the best she can in a really changed and dynamic circumstance that she has no control over. This is happening at a speed and in a kind of complexity that Japan hasn't faced before. So maybe in 30 years, somebody will be having a podcast talking about, Miss Takaichi too, and how she dealt with that. But we're in the middle of it now. So maybe we lack the perspective to really appreciate what's going on in the background. But there is tremendous forces at play here. It's not just the yen, it's not trade flows, it's not just the immigration in Europe and Japan's fear of being infected by that, but it's the military exposure. It's the United States kind of pulling back and forcing Japan to rely on its own methods, and it's a new ball of wax for Japan. So I apologize for waxing so much on that, but I think for those of you who are watching this program on a regular basis, you feel that too. Things are in dynamic change. I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to talk about this sort of thing on a weekly basis. Maya, thank you for setting this up 289 weeks ago. And I really, I look forward to it every Sunday, even though I look forward to other things too. But I do appreciate this opportunity to have this conversation with you. I don't have all the answers. Maya and I don't have all the answers, but nobody else is having the dialogue at the level and the frequency that we are, and I appreciate the opportunity. Maya, thank you very much.
Thank you, Timothy, for being here 289 weeks in a row. I appreciate it. And now let's move into the Q&A session. So we've got the very first question. It came just a few minutes before the earthquake hit here. So I wonder
well, that's what caused it then.
Yes. That was I was wondering. And of course, the question, we've got two questions that came from Byron at around 2:05 or something like that this morning. And Byron, thank you very much for them. I think that we're going to keep the answer of the first question for the next time, because we haven't actually had the physical time to review the report. I will read the question out, but then once again, leave it for the next time, and we'll move to the second one. So the first question is, beyond the warmth generated between the Defense Minister of Japan and India, Mr. Koizumi and Mr. Rajnath Singh, a lengthy joint press statement was released after Mr. Koizumi's visit to India. The link is below. Could you please analyze the joint statement, Timothy? So we are going to talk about this next time. So because 2 o'clock in the morning, it's still midnight in Japan, and so let us give us a bit of a time to do that. Okay, and then the second one is, it was reported that billionaire Takaya Awata is striving to popularize udon through his Torido Holdings company in the US as a category alongside burgers, fried chicken, and pizza. He already has multiple locations on the West Coast. Given that ramen is much more well known than udon worldwide, can you comment on ramen versus udon as a growth category in the US and other overseas markets?
Who is this from?
Byron.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Culinary expert. So
Yes.
I'm not that familiar with this episode, but in a related field, that they've just decided that they're going to cancel Cool Japan. And
Yes.
Cool Japan, the budget and the theory and the movement of Cool Japan was to show the world what's cool about Japan. It's not just manga, but it's also food culture. It's also what's going on in Harajuku, the fashion. And I think it did have some impact on tourism. I think it kind of promoted Japan in a kind of a nice way, but it wasn't very effective. It was very expensive. There were a couple of scandalous investments that were made to promote certain companies or certain biomaterials, that sort of thing. But it was shut down just this last week. Ramen versus udon versus soba. That's a tough one. I remember when I first ate ramen, it was when I was in Okinawa. It was, this is fantastic. And the Okinawan ramen is a little bit different, so it's especially delicious. But I think from wherever you are from, or hail from, or where you did your mission, or where you did your graduate school, or where you did your JET program, the ramen from that district kind of tends to be your favorite. But ramen it's easy, it's quick, it's inexpensive, and it is quintessentially Japanese. Udon, on the other side, is a little bit light in flavor, not as robust, and even more than that is soba, or maybe somen. And of those, I I don't eat ramen that much anymore. It's too rich. Um, I used to do it after drinking, or maybe just as a stopgap, but it's too much for my system to take. But I prefer somen nowadays. Somen is so refreshing, but it's only kind of like a spring or summer dish. But I don't have much to add there. Maya, what are your favorites in that regard?
Well, that's a difficult question. Yeah, I think I prefer soba nowadays. Sometimes ramen, as you say, but they're quite rich indeed, and maybe once a month is already enough for me.
Yeah,
But yes, soba is really good. And udon, I think that because udon is produced basically of refined flour, and when it comes to glycemic, what was that? I don't remember the terminology already, but basically they say that yes, it's really good for people, who exercise a lot and who do not, sit at their desks immediately after lunch and so on and so on, because it is kind of conductive to developing diabetes. If you don't exercise, is what I mean. But maybe that's true about ramen too. Not so much about soba and somen,
yeah,
but I think it's really a different thing. Basically, a different. These are different noodles, different nutritional values, and everything. So why not? I think that with udon you can actually have curry udon, right? In Japan, you
right.
can eat udon with curry. So you can change the taste, you can change the flavor. So, and if you exercise enough so that you don't have to worry about your health, then why not?
Well, what a question coming out of DC. This comes out of left field. I think there's probably something more. There's some economic, or
Yeah.
there's something else going on there that Byron hasn't quite hit on. So why don't you know give us a little bit more flavor next week so that we can respond. This isn't a food show, but we talk about all sorts of different things here, don't we?
Yes, indeed. And given that udon is produced from, that's komugiko, right? It is
Right.
wheat flour. Then maybe it is easier to produce it on spot in the United States instead of producing it here and then exporting it there. So maybe
Yeah.
there is some economics there as well. Who knows, really? It's different from soba, right? Because who knows? I'm not sure actually how much soba is produced in the United States. So there are a lot of things to think about it. So Byron, please help us a little bit with a little bit more detail there. Okay, and moving on to Aloha Apostle, another early riser in on the show every morning here. So the question from him is: Time Magazine wrote an article about Takaichi only sleeping between 0 and 3 hours a night. They make the argument that younger voters see this as unhealthy and outdated, while others honor it. So, what is your view on this? Is it good or bad, Timothy?
Um, I don't know. Everybody's, you know, jiggered a little bit differently. I
Mm.
understand that President Trump only sleeps a couple of hours every night too. Time Magazine hasn't focused on that, but I think there are a lot of people that they're just like that. They don't need that much sleep. They recuperate quickly. Maybe their lives are shorter. I don't know, but they burn very bright when they're in that time zone, and maybe that's what their motivation is. I have this time. I'm in my prime. I need to do this. I can't waste any moment, and maybe that's what drives them. But also it could be that that's all your body, your biological clock needs. And then what are you going to do? Lay in bed and look at the ceiling? No, you're going to get up and get active again.
Yeah, I think that it becomes a problem when it gets, promoted as a work style, because here in Japan, if somebody high up in the hierarchy, even social hierarchy, not only organizational but social hierarchy, when they, try to promote their work style or working styles, then it can become really problematic, especially when it is so grueling, like having up 3 hours of sleep per night. And of course, I mean, in the beginning, when Prime Minister Takaichi, when she was elected, she said, I work, work, and work. So it is seen, in a sense, by the younger generations as a kind of, imposing or trying to impose that working style, although I don't think that is what she meant back then. So people are sensitive, and obviously politicians have to be careful with how they express their thoughts and ambitions as well. All right, and moving on. Just give me a second here. Yes, Hiroko-san, thank you very much with the details about the earthquake. She says the epicenter was in southern Ibaraki prefecture at a depth of 68 kilometers, and the earthquake had a magnitude of 5.9. So yes, it was really a strong one, felt here in Tokyo, especially in the northern part of Tokyo.
No tsunami warning.
No tsunami warning, thankfully, and Ibaragi, I think that it was even more scary to be there. All right, and once again, there is another question from Aloha. So it is about the 4 railway workers that were hit by a high-speed train and who died. So with all the technology advances in Japan, why don't they have an airbag system that triggers moments before an accident? And also, it could be helpful for those who choose to jump in front of trains. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, these railroad systems are guarded by impenetrable barriers, right? You've got a no man's land where the trains are running. I think the airbag issue is um, not very feasible. But these were workers themselves, and if you've ever been on a train or watched the conductor, he goes through several motions. He points, he checks, he says it out loud, and then he takes action. Right? So they've got a whole process of, safety first. When you see it on construction sites, anzen daiichi, it really means it. And the more reputable firms really practice it. The number of accidents per site is very, very low. It's a little bit more costly, but you avoid those kinds of accidents. This one was really devastating because there were 4 workers. They were on duty. They were supposed to be watching things, and what? How in the hell does something like this happen? And it wasn't. I don't think that all 4 of them were injured in standing together. It was an incident that occurred in 2 or 3 locations. They just didn't read the signal right, or the train was. I'm not quite sure about the details of it, but yeah, it is rather alarming that sort of thing could happen. So there'll be an investigation for sure.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Okay, and we are moving on towards other questions. So there is a question from Hiroko-san saying, how do the U.S. sanctions against the International Criminal Court President Tomoko Akane, which were imposed after the court pursued arrest warrants for Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu, affect the U.S.-Japan relations?
Well, I mean, she is a representative from Japan, so she has diplomatic immunity. She has all the prerequisites of being protected as a visitor. And what the United States has done is they've singled her out. And if she goes to the bank, to make a transaction or to receive a wire transfer on her personal status, she's going to run into trouble. And I think all of us can appreciate that if you go to the bank and you've mixed up your secret code 2 or 3 times and you're locked out, that really puts a stop to your day. You need to fix that pretty quickly because you need access to your cash whenever you want it. And so for something like that to happen to somebody at her level, that's a really big deal. And it also limits her ability to travel. This is unprecedented. And I think it just reveals how, number one, how committed the Trump administration is in protecting its interests and projecting its power. And also, it the prime minister's response was somewhat weak. The foreign ministry provided a response that was a tiny bit stronger. She backed off on it a little bit because I think she understands how Trump operates and what he reacts to. So she toned it down a little bit. But she's been criticized for that kind of meekness of response. She did the same thing with Putin. She didn't really respond too forcefully, not as forcefully as the foreign ministry wanted. But there are other things going on in the background too that she's considering in her actions. So we're not privy to all of that. And it could be a personality that she's just not very confrontational, but I suspect it's far deeper than that. But I think, with having initiated it, it's probably already been withdrawn. The signal was sent, the signal was received, and hopefully, actions to accommodate that controversy will transpire as well. So I think that's the hope of the United States, and it's a signal to everybody else too.
Yeah, but we also know that basically the arrest warrants, they were signed and backed up by other NATO member countries, right? And even Britain and Germany, they backed that. They signed on the warrants. So I think that it's not just Japan. And also, I believe that Japan is actually doing much better when it comes to basically working with the Trump administration, because Japan is very cleverly picking its battles.
Yeah.
Right. And the question is, I mean, how deep is the American administration going to or willing to go here? Maybe. Because the Japanese are very good at avoiding open confrontation. And once again, yes, I think that they have been doing that really well on state level, right? So the question, though, is, once again, will it be held against them? And for how long, if it will? So,
Well,
I'll
look into that. I'll look into that and report next week what the status of that is. But I suspect it'll be withdrawn pretty quickly.
Okay, let's see. You mean it means the sanctions, or do you? Oh, right.
The
okay.
Sanctions. Yeah.
The sanctions. Let's see. Okay, and then we've got another question here. Right. Manabe-san, thank you very much. Manabe-san says, udon is daily food in Sanuki, where is my homeland. Yes. Sanuki udon is also very popular here in Tokyo. So, and it is a delicious one, delicious dish indeed. Okay, and let me go through. Yes, through other questions here. I saw another one, and it is from Doi-san. Thank you very much for the question. So while you were talking about ministers and the reshuffling, Timothy, so Doi-san's question is about Kobayashi Takayuki. So what do you think about him and his chances there?
Well, he's always a strong contender. He's young. He's from Chiba. He is a bright guy, very photogenic, and I think he's got a good position already. I think he will continue to go up. That's one of the great things about Japanese politics is once you learn the people's names, they never disappear. They always stay in politics. Even Ichiro Ozawa, he made a comment this last week. He's been out of the parliament for what, 10 years? And he's kind of like James Carville in the United States, who was one of the advisors to Bill Clinton, and he always makes comments about the U.S. Democratic Party, and he's often quoted. But Ozawa is something like that, not quite a gadfly, but kind of a gadfly. Very, very experienced. Probably a genius at Japanese politics. But he's kind of out of the game, but he's lobbying things in. So, yeah, it's. Takayuki Kobayashi is got good legs on him, and so don't count him out. Probably, he's got 2 ministerial positions under his belt. You need 3 or 4 to qualify as a candidate for prime minister. I think he's in his early 40s, so he's got there's plenty for him to do, and he's clean. He's I think he's got a great potential for us.
Right. Okay. And there is a question from, 2 weeks ago, actually. It's less than 2 weeks, maybe, which I just missed last week, and I'm sorry for that. But so the question is, the yen has strengthened by about 7% against the
Yes.
US dollar. What do you see as the main reason for this move? Is it driven primarily by expectations for US interest rates, the Bank of Japan policy, market intervention, or any other factors? And do you believe this appreciation is likely to continue?
Yeah, who is this from?
From somebody's with a handle name Peacock01.
Okay, so
on YouTube.
Peacock's okay. So Peacock lobbed this question in, I think, before the intervention. If you said it was 2 weeks ago, it might have been before the intervention.
It might
And
have
so
been then.
there was a lot of curiosity at that point in time because the yen was scratching up to 164, and people were pensive. What's going to happen? Who's going to move first? What's the move going to be? And then the United States and Japan, in collaboration, intervened in a very big way. We don't know what those exact numbers are. We can't find out this month because the Bank of Japan isn't having an August meeting. So we have to wait till September. Isn't that convenient? But I think that was part of the game as well. So yes, the markets dictate a lot, and then the markets are also played. Many people are criticizing Trump and Secretary Bessent for playing the market rather than administering the market. And so it's a good question, and I really don't have a good answer. But all of the things that you've asked about, Peacock, yes, there are factors in it. But sometimes somebody can lob in something that just changes the dynamic. And one of the things that the finance minister and Ms. Takaichi have repeatedly said is we want this volatility to calm down. We don't want it to be like this because it upsets markets. It prevents people from pricing right. It prevents us from making forecasts. So we want it nice and steady. And if it's going up steady, that's fine. But we don't like this. And they put a lot of effort into tamping that down. That perfectly matches, our expectations of the Japanese personality. Don't give it to me up and down and up and down. Something steady, something reliable, something that I can depend upon. I'll go with that one every time.
Right. Yes. And then there is one more question from Aloha Postal. He says, are there any worries about Trump trying to cut the defense deals with Korea in Japan?
Very much. Very much. That's Aloha?
Yes.
So if you are Japan and you're watching what the United States did to South Korea, you're scratching your head and saying, wait, I thought South Korea and Japan were bound at the hips, kind of like Japan and the United States are bound at the hips. And if the United States is going to do that to Korea, what would they do to us? How exposed are we? We relied on them as good friends for decades. And now it looks like that's not a reliable decision. we need to protect ourselves. We need to have fallback positions, and we need to have contingencies. And so, yes, that was a very, very shocking move. And many people say it's to placate Kim Jong-il. It's to kind of reopen that. And I think that's a clever, a great thing if he could do that. I mean, North Korea is just, it is a wild card that needs to be somehow managed. China can't manage him. Russia can't manage him. He's on his own mission, and he has tools to do that too. So if Trump is successful at kind of tapping that down, I think that would be a great thing for the entire region, for the entire world. I don't know if, and probably he's thinking whatever it costs to do that, the benefit far outweighs the cost of doing that. So even if Japan gets upset, and South Korea certainly is upset about this, I'm going to do it because for the greater good, Machiavelli. Here we are again.
Right. Okay. And also another question. Do Japanese people keep up with the American midterm elections?
Not really.
Yeah,
Even
there
I
isn't
think
much
even
talk.
for Americans, it's a little bit boring and not very exciting. Politics is politics is in some quarters looked down upon here in Japan as well, but everybody's sensei, and so they have an elevated position. That's not necessarily the case in the United States. And then there are some real kooks that are elected as representatives in the city council or in the state councils, representatives of districts, and that's because most people don't vote. And so the people who feel strongly about a certain issue, even though they might be kooky, yeah, they tend to have sway. That doesn't happen so much here. Japan is not so much of a multifaceted country where you've got different. I mean, the United States, it's so large and it's got so many cultures embedded in it. That's not so much the case here. But yeah, I think it's for the Japanese, it's very confusing. So unless you're really a political addict, it's not that interesting for you to follow.
All right, and then thank you very much for this. I think that we have finished with the questions and comments today. To everybody who participated in this Q&A, thank you so very much. For everybody who watched, thank you so very much again. I hope that you have a great Sunday and also a good week coming up. So thank you, Timothy, for not running away.
Well, I tried that once and it didn't work out very well for me. But Maya, as we close up, I want to mention, it is kind of a downtime for the economy, for politics, and that sort of thing. And I think more people, as we've discovered, more people are taking time to watch the podcast or listen to it, actually read the synopsis. And over the last week or so, I've received just out of the blue comments and personal emails on LinkedIn and on my email from friends that I've had for many years that I haven't heard from, and they just say, "Hey, Langley, how you doing? It's good to see you. I watch you on your boat, and I really enjoy your podcast. I learn a lot, and thank you for what you're doing." And that this last week I had 4 or 5 of those, and it's so rewarding to hear that, because most of the time we just do what we're work. We just do our work. We show up, we perform, and sometimes people say thank you. Sometimes they hit like. But something like this is really meaningful, and so I appreciate that. And I just want to share that with everyone. Thank you very much for this great opportunity to interact with you. And
Thank
you too,
you.
Maya.
Oh, just by the way. Right, indeed. Okay, so yes, so Timothy, I know that you're out there. Stay hydrated. Hiroku-san says thank you both, and stay cool and hydrated and be safe for those in Kumamoto, Ibaragi, Chiba, and other places impacted by the natural disasters. Yes, indeed, very much so. And we will be here once again next Sunday, 8:20 Japan times in the morning, Japan time. Please join us again, and
Our last
have a
briefing
great
of
week.
August.
Last week, yes, that's true, the weekend. Yes, okay.
Yep.
See you next time then.